Well, thank you for having me. It's just Andy, you had the full presentation done. I don't have much left to say about myself, really. The reason I'm here is also because I was actually contacted not by the Geopark directly, but by the Irish World Academy at the University of Limerick, where I did a master's in Irish traditional music performance. I finished last year. So the Geopark was looking for someone to present some of the academic research that's been happening, if there was any, about the music of the Burren specifically. So there wasn't anything going on, so they asked me to put something together, which I was delighted to. Start at number one. I'm going to kill the suspense straight away, because if anyone is expecting to have a presentation about the regional style of Irish traditional music of the Burren, it doesn't exist. There isn't an actual Burren style of Irish music. There's a few reasons for that, but the easiest way to put it out to you, and we'll come to some detail after, is to actually just look at a map. So I've grossly limited the Burren kind of around this and the different. We can talk about the Geopark, about the National Park, but I think culturally, if you go, from Corfin, Kilfenora, Doolin, Fenor, Ballyvaughan, and around, up as far as the Burren lowlands here and back down, more or less works. And when you look at where villages and towns are located, apart from Carron, which is right in the middle, all the settlements are around on the periphery of the Burren. So when you talk about traditional music that's been playing for hundreds of years, you can easily imagine that when somebody had to go from Corfin to Ballyvaughan or from Doolin to Gort, these were massive treks. And at the time, music was traveling a lot slower than it was now. And we'll come back to this in a minute, but basically there was a lot of regional style were almost isolated, and some villages would even have different styles. So if you don't have to go that far back. If you go 80 to 100 years ago, Doolin had a different style than Kilfenora, and Kilfenora had a different style than Corfin, and Corfin had a different style. So that's why I said I'll kill the suspense straight away. There is not one Burren style of playing, but there are loads of similarities. It's very rich tradition, as you'll see, a lot of diversity. And what we're going to do is follow the construct of regional styles, and that's been well established through research, is kind of a modern construct, like those paradigms. 100 years ago, nobody cared about if the people, let's say, of East Clare were playing East Clare music. They just played their music. So it's something that in more modern days we had to put together. And mostly the one important factor in determining a regional style of music would have been iconic musicians who either were teaching extensively, or who would have been the first one to be recorded or recorded extensively. But usually it would be one or two key musicians that sort of gave a modern description of what a regional style was. If you take a very famous example, it would be Slieve Lucra down in Kerry, Limerick, Cork area, and you take Pádraig O'Keeffe and Julia Clifford, they'd be the two key musicians. So around here, because the pockets were more isolated, in Doolin you had the Russells, you had the Killouries. Then if you went to Kilfenora, well, the Cayley band is the main one with all, the Lynch family, the War family. And if you went then to Ballyvaughan, Bell Harbour, you'd have Chris Droney. And they were really, really isolated in that way. But throughout the last century, there's been a lot more connections, and these musicians all knew each other, especially when cars came about. They were able to, it was easier for them to meet up and exchange tunes. So what we're going to do, we're going to follow actually the map. We'll go around, and I've picked 7 examples that will illustrate a bit of variety, but also similarities. There's a lot of great musicians that I had to leave out. So it's the disclaimer, they're not all in there. It's not possible in half an hour. But what I've decided to do, we'll start with, I'll go very quickly about Francis Nayland from Kilnaboy, then we'll go around and speak briefly about the Kilfenora Ceilidh Band, then we have Michael Russell. I've included Sean Tyrrell, and actually I've also done this on purpose, right? To not only have native people from the area, because people traveling is part of what makes a local tradition. So Sean Tyrrell is from Galway originally, and it was important that I mentioned the singing tradition as well. Then with Chris Droney. Then I pushed it as far as Joe Cooley. So for those who know a bit about Irish music, that's a bit of a stretch. So Joe is from Peterswell. That's right here. But he played and worked in the Burren quite a bit, and his influence is huge. And so was the influence of Tommy Peoples, who is from Donegal originally, but lived in Clare between Corfin and Tuna and married a girl from Kilfenora. He was a huge part of Clare music. So we'll finish with Tommy, and that kind of give us the link with composition as well. So number one is Francis Nayland. Who'd heard about Francis Nayland before? He's not one of the most famous, and he actually emigrated quite young. He was a flute player from Kilnaboy who went to America, and over there he actually recorded an awful lot and was part of different ensembles. He was in the Kilfenora Ceilidh Band when he was young, before he emigrated. But yeah, he actually played and shared his music from his own County Clare with the people of Massachusetts for over 5 decades, to which he was inducted into the Coltus Ceoltóirí Éireann Hall of Fame for the northeast region of the North American province. I actually didn't know there was such a thing, but when I was researching, I was like, this is cool. So here's a little clip of Francis playing, and we're not going to go into the detail of the styles and the techniques that musicians use, but I think the musicians I've picked, they'll show you how different everyone sounds like. Versions. These are really, it's a great version. Like I said, I wasn't going to go into too much detail, but the phrasing and the turns he takes into the tunes are really fabulous, and it's very different from how we play these tunes today, but we're very lucky to have these recordings. Okay, next, and I will not go too much into detail with the Kilfenora Ceilidh Band, because if you haven't been to the Kilfenora Ceilidh Band parlour next door in the centre, you should really do. It's really, it's brilliant. And I mean, we're talking about one of the oldest Ceilidh bands in the country, probably the most iconic, and still going strong as it is. I suppose Andy would be much better placed than me to tell you more about the Ceilidh Band, but in the modern history of the Ceilidh Band probably changed when they won those 3 All-Ireland titles in the 50s, and that's kind of when they started being so busy and started with the touring, which there were ups and downs throughout until the 80s, 90s, but they got through, and it's local families that keep it going. You know, the Lynches, the Wards, Mulqueens, McCormicks. There's actually the family tree of the Kilfenora Ceilidh Band is a really cool thing to see. And this has created its own Kilfenora style, because the people who are not necessarily members of the Ceilidh Band, everyone knows the sets. Everyone knows when the set starts, the tempo and rhythm is there. So it has become the Kilfenora style of playing. There are exceptions, of course, and actually when we go back to Tommy Peoples, the fact that Tommy joined the Kilfenora Ceilidh band and taught and influenced so many fiddle players of the era makes such a great mix. You have people like Tony Linaro or James Devitt James is really a Kilfenora fiddle player, but you can hear Tommy Peoples in his playing, who's from Donegal, which is like in itself quite amazing. But again, if you haven't seen it, go check the Kilfenora Ceilidh band parlor. We'll have a quick listen here, probably the most famous set. That's a recording from I think 1995, so it's not a very old one. I'll show a clip from earlier, from the 80s. But you can hear it's nothing to do with the previous recording on Francis Nayland. Like here it's just the high energy and lift. And what we'll do, so I'll jump here, I'll show you that clip of the old, and hopefully that works. See, let me try another player. I was installing and deinstalling codecs earlier, but we shall see. No. One last try, and in case we still have the sound, but. Hey! So yeah, that's from 1985, I think. Another set of famous Kilfenora tunes, single jigs. Nice. We'll keep going. I'm conscious of the time. Half an hour is so hard, you have no idea. Okay, next, I just focused on Maiko Russell. So that's more my area of expertise, the dueling side of things. So Maiko was a tin whistle and flute player, but also singer, storyteller. He would dance as well, like a true showman, really. His brothers, Packy and Gussie, were also great musicians. They didn't get as much of the media attention as Maiko did, but the reason they became so famous really is at the time, starting from the early 30s with Seamus DeLargy and then to the 40s and 50s, there was this strong preservation war going really with folklorists and archivists and collector going around the place. And when they found the dueling was really a pocket of kind of like untouched tradition from older days, and that included the Irish language actually. People were still speaking Irish back then in dueling. And so what happened when Maiko especially got all this attention from radio and television and went touring all over Europe and America, it actually brought back people in the area to actually come back to the source. You know, at the time of where it would have been a global folk revival, people wanted to know where the Pure Drop was coming from, and that's pretty much one of the main reasons why tourism became so strong and early in early days, you know, from the 70s onwards, and still to this day, the reputation of the area, not only Doolin but you know North Clare in general, as a destination for music lovers or people that have an interest, is still really, really strong. And so Maiko had this really unique style of playing that was a direct link with the older days. You know, it was, well, you'll hear straight away, it's not as ornamented as many others. And a lot of these songs, actually, I'll mention it with Sean Tyrrell, they would have been coming from an older repertoire of local singers, typically Fisherman. There's a lovely song, I don't remember if I put it in, but we'll just put a little clip of Maiko, and he talks at the beginning, so we get the accent as well, which is part of the music, really.
The first two jigs, working near Nats, they call it the southwest wind, and another jig, the little black pig, in Gaelic language, that would be it. And Ballaween Go.
Maiko Russell is probably the musician in North Clare, possibly in Clare, on which there was the most academic research done about his playing. Even Niall Keegan, who is the director of the Irish World Academy, he would have studied his playing, because behind this apparent simplicity, it's actually, nobody can play like Maiko. And so it's really fascinating. And I suppose between actually Kilfenora and Maiko Russell, the difference again is so huge. Like, and they would have played together, all these lads, you know, the likes of Paddy Mullins, they all knew each other, but Maiko had this thing of being a solo performer, and in Kilfenora, I believe it was really all about playing together. And in Doolin in general, actually, there was a lot of course they played together at times, but it was a lot more individual, you know, like the Killary brothers that played the two of them together. I know that usually the three Russell brothers, they usually didn't play together. And so it's a different approach to music, probably from, like, again, an older generation kind of thing. Okay, let's continue on to Sean Tyrrell. So like I said, to illustrate some of the diversity and different types of music that we have, I needed to bring in a singer. And the reason I picked Sean Tyrrell, I could have picked like a singer from older days, but I found a lovely clip that I'll play there where Sean talks about the Burren. So from Galway originally, moved to the Burren and lived there for most of his life. He's a singer-songwriter, but he's also very, very famous for having put very old poems into music. And he had a very a strong interest into history and this old poetry, which is kind of a link with, there would have been a bardic tradition in North Clare, especially around Corcomroe Abbey and the Flaggy Shore and all that. There is, I don't remember the name of it now, but there you can still find remains of a kind of a bardic school. Actually, people would come there to train. So he would have taken some of these very old poems and put them to music. And I also put there a little quote from Charlie Pigott, who took part. He was one of the authors in a book called The Book of the Burren that was published in the early 90s, I think. And Charlie would have done a lot of research about the Burren, and he says this interesting thing that will just show you the connection between everyone in the area. Another poet-songwriter, Francis A. Fahy of Kinvara, composed such well-known songs as Galway Bay, The Old Played Shawl, or The Queen of Connemara. And present-day singer-songwriter Sean Tyrrell, who has lived in the Burren for a number of years, is actively engaged in setting to music much of the obscure and forgotten earlier Irish poetry. So this, I didn't want to do a presentation about the older traditions of music in Clare, and in the Burren there would have been one, especially harpists, traveling musicians, bards, but in half an hour I said I'll focus on the trad. So yeah, let's just play that clip. So it's Sean Tyrrell singing Sweet Ballyvaughan, who it was actually written by a lady called Judy McKeown. I don't know her actually, but the song is lovely. And just before he starts the song, he mentions, he just says a few words about Ballyvaughan.
Well, I've been living in County Clare now longer, I think, than I ever lived in Galway. My nearest village is the village of Ballyvaughan, which is where, when I go to play for amusement, or if some friends are visiting and I want to go over and find a place to play, then it's to Greens and Ballyvaughan I go. In fact, this session has been going on for 14 years now. It's a gorgeous song about the Burren as well, which is a magic place to live in. To be either itself or Connemara, I'd have to be mine. Raindrops cling to the branches. The sun makes them diamonds at dawn. The birds sing a song for the whole world to hear. And nature, she just carries on. The winter's retreating, defeated by spring. Oh, how I wish I loved here. I lived in the hope you'll return across the sea to the Burren to make the prayer.
Like he said, it's a magical place, and we'll come back to this because I want to talk to you about composers as well later. But yeah, Sean was definitely one of the iconic musicians who played in Kilfenora. He would play the lot down in Doolin as well, so all over the Burren really. Okay, next we have Chris Droney, probably the one that definitely doesn't need an introduction. Chris, who sadly passed away there a couple of years ago at the tender age of 97, 8? Yeah, old anyway. And he played right then. I met him like 6 months beforehand. It was all outside and during COVID stuff, but he was playing fine music. Legendary concertina player. The concertina is probably, I could have done the half-hour presentation on the concertina players from the area, but I'll just focus on Chris next year. He became legendary because he's the only person, I believe, that he actually won 9 consecutive All-Ireland concertina titles between the 50s and the 60s, plus a handful of other medals in duets and ensembles. He was also with the Kilfenora Ceilidh band for a bit. I don't think it was anything regular, really. And people don't know this as much about Chris Droney, but he was also he composed some great tunes, and one of them is Peaceful Corcomroe, which obviously being from Bell Harbour, he would have been very close to Corcomroe Abbey, so I'll just play a bit of that tune for a bit. Again, it just shows the diversity of all types of tunes and music, really. is really gorgeous. I'm conscious of the time, so we'll keep going. Chris, there's a short clip here. I won't play it, but his son Francis still plays. Actually, plays in Ballyvaughan regularly. I believe he'd come to Kilfenora as well. Great concertina player that just carries on the tradition, and Anne as well, and then the grandkids and great grandchildren. So it's really a musical dynasty. But here we go, Joe Cooley. So, like I said, this is a bit. I'm pushing it. I'm pushing the boundaries of the Burren, but. Joe Cooley is played extensively in the area, in the Burren, Lisdon, Varna, and East Timon, Doolin. He was working as a tradesman, and he would have worked a good bit there around the area. And just his influence, he is definitely one of the most influential accordion player of the last, ever in Irish music. And the reason I wanted to mention somebody who's a little bit outside is also to show the influence that's coming into the Burren. And again, taking from the Charlie Piggott, he explains this, especially when it comes to the older days and music in the countryside. Movement of musicians throughout the countryside has always provided the basis for the exchange and survival of many tunes and airs. The popular East Galway musicians Joe Cooley and Joe Leary played and worked as tradesmen for many years around the Burren, leaving their stamp on many a bar counter of the major hotels there. And I think, it's important to kind of remember that all these styles of music that we want to call regional style, they've just been constructed over decades and hundreds of years of people coming and going, really. And actually, Joe Cooley is really interesting because he's from East Galway, but East Galway, the modern construct paradigm that people would consider East Galway music is very subtle and soft music, like Paddy Fahey music, closer to East Clare. But then you have Joe Cooley in the middle of this. That's just wild, really. And I haven't looked into it, but it'd be very interesting to see his influence on the accordion players that would have been with the Kilfenora Ceilidh band then, you know. And in this clip, he also plays with Des Mulcair. Everyone know Des Mulcair in the room. He's from Crusheen. There's Des. So that's from 1973. So there's another man who is little outside the Burren, you know, Crusheen, but has been coming to Kilfenora to do. He was in Kilfenora last month for the festival.
He didn't actually make it because he's not been coming out since the pandemic.
Because I know he's not doing well. He's getting older.
But he's actually learning the pipes now.
Why not? Okay, and we'll finish with Tommy. So like I said, Tommy from Donegal, but he's lived here over 30 years. The one thing that I want to focus about Tommy is, well, two things. His influence on local fiddle players. We've mentioned that briefly between Tony Linan or James Devitt. You just hear, or James Cullinan, just hear his influence is huge. There was actually a talk about Tommy in Corfin at the traditional festival in March. It was very interesting. But he was a very, very prolific composer, and in the book that I've brought, you can come and have a look later, there's a huge part that's dedicated to Clare, and he actually went out of his way to make a list of the tunes that he wrote specifically about Clare and the Burren. So, and he writes in the book, it's like mentioned so many times how much he loved the area and the Burren in particular. He wrote tunes like The Dolman, The Burren Flowers, Kilnaboy Forge, The Roadside Tavern, The Lynches and Wards of Clogher. Like, he was heavily influenced by the Burren, and I just took a snippet there of, that's from his book that he's produced. So he wrote in the book, all his compositions are written by hand, but he went out of his way to put all the flowers of the Burren Flowers, you know, in the name Bloody Cranesbill. And in the book, he goes into so much detail about the flora and the geology and everything about the Burren. You just feel how much it meant to him. And that's kind of how I wanted to wrap it around. I won't play a clip of Tommy because I think I'm going well over my half an hour. Okay. It's actually, I couldn't find Tommy playing this, there's no recording actually of the Burn Flowers, but I picked another clip. He plays another one of his tune, La Cosa Mulligan, I think, or I don't remember, but anyway, just to hear anything that Tommy plays. It's one of his own tune anyway. And this is actually shot in the Burren pub in Boston. Yeah. And of course, Tommy was a member of the Kilfenora for some years, but I think his work as an individual performer is really where he was showing all his brilliance, a bit like Maiko in that sense. And he would have played all over the Burn with everyone that we've mentioned, like in this presentation. So, yeah, the influence of the Burn, this is more where that's what it's all about, really. So there isn't a Burn style of playing Irish traditional music, but there is so much music around the entire Burn. Rich and diverse tradition that encompasses, it's not only musicians, like we've said, there's the singers, there's the storytelling, which we didn't go near, dancers and visual artists as well. Like, it's just a place that inspires a lot of people. I've mentioned lots of people that I haven't mentioned, Micheline Conlon, the Killouries, or individual Kilfenora musicians. But you've also noticed that I've only been talking about dead people. The tradition is really alive and well. There's so many younger musicians of all ages, from kids all through people who are, well, now the older generation, but it's really, really healthy. And like that, it's been going on for over 50 years, local styles getting diluted, modernization, it's the internet, loads of different reasons. It's not all bad, that's just the way Irish music is a living tradition. Things keep happening, but we're very lucky around here that we've a lot of work has been done for archiving and preserving that. I'm thinking especially about Eugene Lamb, who did so many videos in the late 80s, early 90s. And then, like that, academic research, loads of recording of tunes that are available to us and transcriptions. So we have all this, and thank God there are still people that are passionate about it and play these old settings of tunes. I'm guilty of that, I love the old settings. But also, that source of inspiration of the Burn is still very, very strong with younger composers. And I've actually changed, so from the 7, I've put like younger musicians here. But if you take people like Yvonne Casey, very, very like amazing fiddle player who composes great music, very influenced by Tommy Peoples as well. Tim Collins with the Kilfenora band, like the amount of stuff that he's been doing, the commissions, stuff he's written is amazing. There's a great friend of mine, you mentioned Rachel Reed earlier, her husband Alan is an amazing banjo player. And I was talking to him about this presentation, so we're just going to finish with, I literally asked him in a WhatsApp message, do you have anything to say? And I just took a snippet of what he says about the Burn, and I think it just sums up what the Burn represents for us artists and musicians. I'll just leave it with you with Alan, because I think he just nailed it.
It's a very inspiring place to be a musician. I've been composing music early on in my kind of career as a musician, and when I moved to the Burn 6 years ago, my composition definitely took a bit of an acceleration in terms of I was definitely writing more stuff, I think, just the beauty of the place and the fact that it's kind of bordered by several villages and regions where a lot of music really helps. And there's a big sense of place in the Burren, like I live kind of the north central part of it, but you could be on Finland on one side or Tubbard on the other, and it's still the Burren, and you kind of, when you live in it, you kind of feel like the whole lot of it is your home because of the physical sensation of looking at the Burren itself. I think also there's a certain atmosphere, and I think people are quite friendly in it as well, so it all kind of adds up.
Well, he really, says it all, It's beautiful. All these places around it are full of music, but also that sense of place that wherever you are in the Burren, you look at it, you know you're in the Burren, and it's very, that atmosphere when you're a creator of some sort is actually very comforting. I just thought the way he said it was lovely.